Picture this. You stand barefoot on the cold, uneven stones of a bustling Roman slave market, the air thick with sweat, animal dung, and the metallic sting of fear. Your wrists are raw where the manacles have rubbed flesh to red, your hair hacked short and dust still clinging to your skin from the cart that brought you here. You are not alone. Bodies crowd on all sides, shivering, silent, eyes downcast to avoid catching the gaze of the dealers who circle like wolves. Somewhere behind the market walls you hear the rhythmic slap of a whip, and you flinch, instinctively bracing for a pain that, so far, has only been promised. You try not to meet the eyes of the buyers. Their appraising looks cut deeper than the iron. You can taste your own panic, thicken your throat, as one of the mangones, the Roman slave dealers, grabs your chin with calloused fingers and forces your head up to the light. His breath reeks of sour wine and salted fish. He inspects your teeth, your hands, the whites of your eyes, muttering to a scribe who jots notes on a wax tablet. You realize in this moment that you are not being examined for who you are, but for what you might be sold as. A small, sick part of you wonders if it's better to seem strong or to look weak. Each has its own dangers. The man turns your face from side to side, fingers digging into your jaw. Somewhere above the din, an auctioneer's voice rises, booming out descriptions of bodies as if they were livestock. You hear the words, unspoiled, docile, exotic, seasoned for pleasure. You might think the worst is over, that capture and transportation are the true horrors of slavery. But in Rome, the real ordeal is only just beginning. The slave market is not simply a place of sale. It is a machinery of transformation, designed to strip away your past and remake you into something marketable, something desirable, something profitable. The process is so methodical, so calculated, that you quickly understand this is not chaos, but a system refined over centuries. The other captives around you, faces blank with shock, have already started to fade from personhood into property, their lives redefined by the cold calculus of Roman commerce. The handlers bark commands, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in the broken languages of 100 conquered provinces. Most of you do not understand, but it doesn't matter. Obedience is not a choice. But here's where the nightmare deepens. Before you can be sold, you must be prepared. The word means something far more disturbing than you realize. Preparation in the Roman slave market is a ritual of humiliation and dehumanization. The first step is the washing. Not a cleansing, but a public scrubbing, performed by hired attendants with rough sponges and buckets of cold water, meant less to clean you than to display your flesh. The crowd laughs as dirt is scraped from your skin, fingers probing for hidden scars or marks of disease. If you resist, a blow to the ribs quickly teaches you what is expected. You see another captive forced to strip, their body turned and posed, oil rubbed onto their arms and thighs until they glisten in the morning sun. The oil is not for your comfort. It's to make muscle and skin look supple, to disguise bruises, to tempt the gaze of buyers who want proof of youth and vitality. You try to disappear into yourself, but you can't. Every touch is a reminder that you are being evaluated, every whispered comment a reminder that soon someone will own you. You catch snippets of the dealer's patter. Look at the teeth. No rot. She's not local, but the Greeks always fetch a higher price. You see a young boy made to run back and forth before a line of buyers, his legs trembling with exhaustion. Good stamina, someone murmurs. Could fetch extra if he's compliant. Your own sense of self shrinks to a pinpoint, nothing but breath and pulse as the process grinds on. The slave market, you learn, is a factory for manufacturing value, where dignity is the first thing stripped away. What you don't know, what most people today would never imagine, is just how sophisticated this process has become. The Romans perfected the arts of seasoning slaves for different roles, but the most lucrative, by far, are those destined for sexual service. The dealers know exactly what their buyers want, and they are ruthless in delivering it. Think Roman society was all marble columns and philosophy? The truth is uglier. Sexual slavery is not just tolerated. It is institutionalized. documented in the law and regulated by the state. The aediles, Rome's public magistrates, oversee the trade, making sure taxes are paid and diseases are checked. The brothel districts, lupinaria, operate in plain sight, with slaves displayed in barred windows like merchandise. But the real preparation happens before any auction, behind locked doors. You feel your heart hammer in your chest as you're separated from the main group and herded down a narrow hallway, the stone walls sweating with damp. Here, the dealers and their assistants begin the true work, examining, measuring, manipulating. Every scar, every birthmark, every aspect of your body is catalogued and graded. "Virgin?" one asks, glancing at a scribe. "No signs of childbirth?" "Good. She'll bring double. If you flinch, they laugh. If you protest, you're beaten, never on the face where it might lower your value. Sometimes you hear the dealers discussing you as if you were a piece of art to be restored. Teeth need whitening. Hair must be lightened for the Greek buyers. Stretch the muscles, loosen the hips. She mustn't appear stiff." But it gets worse. The slave dealers employ a perverse kind of psychological warfare. To maximize your price, they must erase any sign of rebellion or individuality. You are forced to stand, sit, smile, and obey on command. Your responses rehearsed and corrected with threats. If you're destined for the pleasure market, they teach you to speak phrases in the language of your likely buyer, to hold your posture just so, to drop your eyes at the right moment. If you fail, the lesson is repeated, harder each time. Historical records from the jurist Ulpian describe how dealers would sometimes soften the spirits of new arrivals with food, wine, or, when necessary, drugs. Some are broken quickly, others resist for days before their will finally snaps. The system is so normalized that even outsiders accept it as part of life. Roman law recognized sexual slaves, pueri delicati, and sillae, as special property. Their price could be 5 or 10 times higher than field hands or housemaids. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii's brothel walls shows how public, how visible, this trade truly was. Graffiti boasting of the freshness of new arrivals, price lists scribbled beside explicit images. Buyers come from all walks of Roman society, senators, merchants, priests, each seeking something different, each assured that the product has been prepared to satisfy. But here's where it gets truly twisted. The Roman economy itself relies on this trade. The dealers are not outcasts but respected professionals, licensed by the state and protected by law. The more valuable you are, the greater the incentive to refine the process. Medical texts from Galen detail how ointments, dyes, and even primitive surgeries are used to erase blemishes or simulate youth. The aediles issue edicts regulating display practices. Nakedness is encouraged, but violence that leaves visible scars is discouraged, not out of mercy, but to protect investment. As you stand there, shivering in the harsh morning light, you realize your fate is no longer yours to determine. The machine of Roman slavery has claimed you, and every stage of preparation is another step away from the life you once knew. The city bustles around you, indifferent to your suffering, as buyers circle for the next inspection. The cries of the auctioneer mingle with the laughter of children, the prayers of priests, the shouts of merchants. Somewhere in the crowd, someone nods in approval as you're led forward, your future narrowed to a price and a function. But the real horrors, the ones the markets try to hide, are still waiting, just beyond the next door. You have been prepared, displayed, and transformed. But you are not yet sold, and what comes next will make everything so far seem almost merciful. You're standing in a cramped chamber, stone walls sweating with moisture, the smell of oil and iron thick as you're forced to line up with others. The dealer barks an order. You're told to raise your arms. The first thing they strip away is your clothing. You're left exposed, utterly vulnerable, not just to the eyes of potential buyers but to a jury of handlers, scribes, and physicians, all present to witness your reduction from person to merchandise. A basin of water is sloshed over your shoulders. Cold, abrupt, It stings across any open cuts. A rough sponge works over your skin, scraping away dirt but also dignity. This isn't cleansing. It's theater for the buyers. Your suffering, your shame, becomes part of the sale. But here's where it gets worse. Once your body is bare, the inspection begins. A man with a stylus steps forward, muttering as he notes each detail. No pox. Good hips, skin tone even. Another opens your mouth, checking teeth with a hooked iron. You bite down instinctively and are slapped. Laughter ripples from the other slaves who know that resistance only prolongs the ordeal. The scribe records your scars, counting each one as a potential deduction. Too many marks, price lowered. But if you have none, if you appear untouched, the price might skyrocket. What you feel next isn't just humiliation. It's a strange kind of terror, a vertigo that comes from realizing every detail of your body is being weighed, measured, and categorized. Some buyers request to see you walk, turn, even dance. For slaves intended for the lupanaria, the brothels, the inspection turns explicit. You're forced to mimic gestures, recite memorized phrases in halting Latin or Greek, or demonstrate obedience on command. According to the jurist Ulpian, Roman law permitted these public examinations, describing in detail how prospective buyers had the right to test a slave's compliance before final purchase. Each act of submission is meant not just to reassure the buyer, but to remind you how little of yourself remains. But it doesn't stop with the physical. The psychological seasoning follows, a process even more insidious than the public inspection. The dealers know that a compliant slave is a valuable slave, and the training starts here, before you even leave the chamber. A handler orders you to kneel, to stand, to smile. If you hesitate, the blow comes fast and hard, not to your face but to your ribs or the back of your thighs. You're forced to repeat words of obedience, the meaning only half understood. I will serve. I will not resist. The repetition is designed to break something in you, to overwrite fear with reflex, doubt with compliance. A forward-leaning voice in your mind wonders how much of yourself can be erased in a single morning. But here's where the system's efficiency becomes clear. You're not the first to suffer this. Historical records from the aediles, Rome's public magistrates, describe the preparation of pleasure slaves in chilling bureaucratic detail. Regulations dictated not only how slaves were to be displayed, but even how they should be prepared for their roles. The edict preserved in the Digest of Justinian states, "Let the dealer ensure the goods be in good order, free of blemish, and, if for pleasure, properly seasoned for their task." This is not a world of accidental cruelty. It is a society that writes its horrors into law. For the sexual slaves, there is a further ordeal, the initiation. The dealers select a few to demonstrate their docility before a private audience. You're forced to perform tasks you can barely comprehend. Sometimes a physician is called in to certify your fitness, probing and declaring you intact or open. A scribe records the result in a register, noting whether you are a virgo or used, and how that should adjust your price. The more degrading the process, the higher the tension among those waiting their turn. You learn quickly that tears mean nothing here. If anything, they are expected, even encouraged. But here is where the market's true cruelty emerges. Some buyers, especially those purchasing for elite households or the most profitable brothels, demand a demonstration of compliance before the final bid. This trial can happen in a side room out of sight from the auction block, but the sounds, whimpers, the thud of a hand on flesh, the bark of orders, carry through the thin walls. Ancient sources like Petronius and Martial leave no doubt. The Roman market was engineered to extract the maximum profit from your body, no matter what it cost you. As you wait, shivering in your own skin, you catch a glimpse of another slave, an older boy, mouthing instructions. Don't resist. It only makes it worse. You realize that even survival is a commodity. Your ability to endure, to adapt, to dissociate. The market has trained you, broken you, and now, with every echoing step, it is ready to sell you. You might believe that somewhere, someone will intervene, that a buyer will be merciful, or the law will recognize the horror. But the laws themselves are written to protect the trade, not the traded. In 19 BCE, the ideals of Rome required slave dealers to guarantee that those sold for pleasure were untainted and fit for their intended use. Failure to provide satisfaction could result in a refund, but never in justice for the slave. Here's where it gets truly devastating. In the last moments before the auction, you're forced to rehearse your new role one final time. Stand up straight, smile, respond to your name, even though it's no longer yours. Each movement is monitored. Any hint of defiance is corrected with pain or threat. The dealers pace behind you, murmuring to each other, noting who is ready for the block and who needs more training. You sense with a cold certainty that if you cannot perform, you will not be sold. You'll be sent back for further seasoning, or, worse, discarded as defective. And now, at the very edge of hope, the question settles in your bones. Will you ever escape this system? Or has Rome's machinery already erased the memory of who you were? Now that you've glimpsed the machinery that turns living people into marketable objects, you're beginning to see the patterns that history kept in shadow. If you want to keep unearthing the realities that Rome wanted buried, subscribe now and continue this descent into the secrets of a world that never meant for you to look behind the curtain. But your ordeal isn't over. The auction is about to begin, and the next stage of preparation will push you further than you ever imagined. You're woken long before dawn, the darkness broken only by flickering oil lamps and the hiss of whispered commands. The handlers lead you and the others into a narrow, vaulted chamber. This is where the most intimate alterations begin. The dealers move quickly, hands practiced, faces unreadable. You are stripped again, but this time the routine is slower, more deliberate. An older slave, already broken into obedience, brings out jars of thick, scented ointment. He works the salve into your skin, masking scars and fading bruises that might lower your market value. Another rubs oil into your scalp, massaging until your hair lies flat and glossy. The ointment stings where it meets old wounds, and you have to grit your teeth not to flinch. For a moment, you almost feel like an animal being groomed for show. But here's where it gets darker. The dealers aren't satisfied with simple cosmetics. One produces a powder, imported from Egypt, he boasts, and rubs it along your jawline, lightening your skin. If you're too pale, they'll brush on crushed walnut shell for color. Historical sources like Galen's medical texts describe how slave dealers would alter appearances to suit current trends, even using caustic chemicals to remove blemishes or improve the look of a slave's body. Any sign of individuality is a risk. The goal is a blank canvas that a buyer can imagine as their own. The work goes further. Your teeth are checked and, if necessary, scraped with a sharp bronze tool until they shine white, sometimes filed to remove visible decay. One girl, eyes glassy with pain, has her ears pierced with a heated needle to make her seem more fashionable for certain buyers. The pain is sharp but brief, and then the dealer threads a bit of bronze wire through the hole, twisting it tight. "She'll fetch more now," he says, as if she were an ornament. For others, it's worse. Small scars are cut open and dusted with resin to force them to heal flatter. No buyer wants a flawed product, the dealer reminds you, voice thick with boredom. But it's not only the body they alter. The next stage is rehearsal, a form of psychological reprogramming. You are lined up and drilled like actors before a play. The dealers teach you to smile on command, to respond instantly to a new name. For those destined for brothels or elite households, they teach short phrases in Greek or Latin, just enough to flatter or beg, to make buyers believe you are clever, pliant, exotic. If you stumble, the correction is immediate and brutal. A wooden switch across the hands, a blow to the thigh, a hissed threat in your ear. The message is clear. Every hesitation, every sign of fear reduces your value. You must learn to anticipate desire before it is spoken. You start to sense the contours of a world built entirely around the whims of others. The walls of this chamber are covered with faded frescoes, sea nymphs, lovers entwined, faces frozen in bliss. But these images mock you. They are reminders that pleasure in Rome is always bought, sold, performed. In the records of the satirist Juvenal, you later learn, he describes the slave market as a stage for living statues, painted and polished to satisfy the fantasies of men with money. Here, you are both the actor and the set piece, never the audience. But here's where the machinery becomes institutional. The idols, Rome's public magistrates, inspect the chambers, checking for compliance with the latest regulations. Historical accounts from the Digest of Justinian show how these officials issued edicts dictating not only how slaves should be displayed, but the standards for their preparation. One rule mandates that slaves offered for pleasure must be free of disease and pleasing in form. If you fall short, you are removed from the auction floor, sometimes never seen again. The brothels themselves, the lupanaria, maintain their own rituals. Dealers deliver new arrivals at dawn, where they are paraded before the madams and clients, stripped and spun, inspected and sometimes sampled. The surviving wall inscriptions from Pompeii's brothels document these practices in chilling detail. Names, prices, and specialties painted above the doors. Each body, each face is catalogued, another commodity on Rome's balance sheet. But not everyone breaks the same way. Some try to sabotage their own value, feigning illness or dullness, refusing food, or marking their own skin. The dealers are prepared for this. They threaten, beat, and sometimes drug slaves to force compliance. In rare cases, those who cannot or will not be prepared are cast aside, sent to the mines, the fields, or simply disappeared. The lesson is clear. Value is survival, but only as defined by someone else's appetite. Every moment in the chamber is recorded by the scribe, by the magistrate, by the other slaves. The records are kept not out of compassion, but as property inventories. Lucia, age 13, compliant, trained for Greek phrases, 2 visible scars, market value, 5,000 sesterces. You catch sight of your own entry in the wax tablet, an itemized list of traits and flaws, as if you were a piece of furniture or livestock. This is your new identity. A ledger entry, a price, a function, and the preparations are far from over. But here's where the most chilling realization dawns. The more perfect you become in their eyes, the further you drift from yourself. You are remade for their pleasure. Every trace of your former life, your name, your language, your dignity, scrubbed clean. The historian Petronius wrote, "The market rewards not the honest soul, but the well-shaped shell." Standing in line, you feel yourself hollowing out, preparing to become exactly what the system demands, a blank page for the fantasies of Rome. The handlers lead you out, the light of the market already harsh and bright. The next step is the public display, the final test. You hear the auctioneer warming up his voice, the first crowd gathering. You are ready, or at least they have made you so. But nothing in the world can truly prepare you for the eyes that will judge you next. What happens on the auction block will reveal just how far the machinery of Rome is willing to go to turn flesh into profit and survival into a performance. The noise of the market swells as the handlers usher you and the others onto the auction floor. The sun has barely crested the rooftops, but already the heat radiates off the stone, amplifying the scent of sweat and oil. You are made to stand in a line, naked except for a smear of scented balm, every muscle tense under the scrutiny of the crowd. The auctioneer's voice bellows your assigned number, not your name. Buyers move through the ranks, fingers trailing across arms, shoulders, hips, measuring, testing, prodding for signs of strength or softness, compliance or resistance. A man in a senator's toga lifts your chin, stares into your eyes as if searching for secrets. Another turns you around, inspecting your back for scars. The humiliation is systematic, staged for maximum effect. Your fear is not a deterrent, it's part of the spectacle. But here's where it gets worse. Some buyers don't want just the public show. A handful signal quietly to the dealer, who leads you from the open yard into a low, shadowy room behind the auction platform. The door shuts behind you with a final, echoing sound. The walls are lined with benches. A lamp flickers above, throwing your shadow large and strange. Here, the buyers demand a private pre-inspection. You are told to walk, to undress further, to obey whispered commands. The buyer's hands are clinical, but their eyes are greedy, cold. You are forced to perform small acts of compliance, a turn, a phrase, a dance, a smile. Sometimes it goes further, a demonstration of obedience, a test of how quickly you follow orders, how well you hide fear. Roman satirist Martial, whose words echo across centuries, describes these testings as the true price of flesh, measured in humiliation. The inspection is not just physical. One buyer, the owner of a prominent lupanar in Pompeii, questions you about your skills. Can you sing, dance, recite poetry? The answers don't matter. Your performance does. You realize that in this room, survival depends on how convincingly you can act out another's fantasy. Fail to please, and the dealer notes your failure on his tablet, a mark against your value, a black spot that may condemn you to something worse than sale. The records discovered in Pompeii's brothel district, graffiti, price lists, special qualities inscribed on the walls, are not fables. They are the receipts of bodies, the catalogs of souls traded for coins. But here is where the system sharpens its blade. Some slaves, desperate to escape the worst fates, attempt small acts of sabotage. You've seen it already. A girl who bites her lip until it bleeds. A boy who stands with slumped shoulders, dull eyes, hoping to seem too broken, too much trouble. The dealers are not fooled. They force you to stand straight, smile, speak. If you falter, a sharp prod or whispered threat is enough to restore your compliance. For those who persist, punishment comes swiftly. A night in the cold cellars beneath the market, or taste of the lash. The message is clear. Your pain means nothing. Your will is not your own. And here's where the secrets grow darker. The most profitable deals happen behind closed doors, in whispers and bribes, away from the eyes of the law. Special buyers from elite Roman families come at odd hours, escorted by guards. They seek slaves for the private chambers of senators and generals, or for clandestine gatherings where new entertainments are in demand. The auction becomes a theater, the market a stage, but the real negotiations take place in rooms where your body is discussed like a rare artifact. The historian Seneca writes of these secret sales where the highest price is paid for the deepest shame. The laws of Rome regulate the display, but in the hidden rooms, everything is negotiable, except your freedom. You watch as another slave, younger than you, is led away for a special inspection. His eyes meet yours, wide and shining with terror, and then he is gone. You hear the door close, the muffled voices, the silence that follows. There are stories among the slaves, of those who disappear from the auction, never to be seen again. Some say they are sold into private collections, to households with a taste for cruelty. Others are sent to remote villas hidden from public sight, where there are no witnesses, no limits. You realize the public auction, with all its humiliation and display, is almost merciful compared to what might happen in the shadows. But the market thrives on secrecy and spectacle in equal measure. The crowd outside clamors for more. You are called forward, forced to step onto the marble platform, lights catching every detail of your oiled skin. The auctioneer lists your qualities: height, age, strength, proven docility, and the hints of other, more private virtues. The bidding is fast, impersonal, a blur of raised hands and sharp voices. Each offer is another step away from the world you once knew. The process is efficient, ruthless, indifferent to your fear. A buyer wins the bid. You are handed over like a package, the dealer's receipt pressed into the buyer's palm. Your value now determined, your fate sealed, you are led away into the labyrinth of Roman commerce. As you disappear from the auction, you pass holding cells marked with graffiti, scratched names, pleas for mercy, curses hurled at the gods. Some are fresh, others are decades old, ghosts that linger long after the bodies have been sold. But here is where the system shows its deepest cruelty. For those deemed unsellable, too sick, too broken, too rebellious, the fate is even darker. Some are returned to the dealers for retraining, others are sent to the mines or the galleys, their bodies consumed by labor instead of lust. The archaeological record from the outskirts of Pompeii, where mass graves have been found, is a silent witness to those who vanished without a price. Their bones tell a story the market would rather forget, that in Rome, the value of a life was measured in how well you played your part, or in how completely you failed. The day draws to a close. The market quiets, the unsold return to their cells, the bought led away to new homes, new masters, new forms of servitude. You are one of them now. You feel the brand of the auction on your skin. Not a mark of iron, but the invisible stain of having survived the ordeal. You can still hear the auctioneer's voice, the laughter of the buyers, the closing of that heavy door behind you. But the rituals of preparation are far from finished. For some, the most harrowing seasoning is only beginning, far from the eyes of the city, where no one will ever see what happens next. You are taken from the marketplace not to a home or brothel, but to a shadowed corridor in the back of the dealer's domus, a place called the training room. The air here is close, stale with incense and sweat, the only light a slit in the ceiling. You are joined by a handful of others, faces pale and silent, eyes empty of hope. The handlers close the door behind you with a deliberate finality. This is not the end of your ordeal, but the start of your real transformation, a process that Roman records call consuetudo, but which the slaves themselves whisper of as breaking. At first, it seems routine. You are ordered to kneel, to recite phrases drilled into you in the market, but quickly the demands escalate. The handlers demonstrate, then force you to mimic the gestures of submission, how to undress before a master, how to smile even when afraid, how to lie perfectly still or obey any command without question. The blows, if you hesitate, are swift and targeted. They bruise, but never mark the face. The goal is not just compliance, but a kind of erasure. Cicero, writing about the training of slaves in elite households, describes this with chilling detachment. They must be remade, inside and out, to anticipate every desire, every order, before it is spoken. But here's where it gets truly harrowing. For those destined to serve the most powerful patrons, the seasoning rituals become a form of torture. The dealers and their assistants stage elaborate role plays, testing your responses to simulated punishments or forced performances. One girl is ordered to laugh on command. When she can't, a handler pours cold water down her back, over and over, until she chokes out a hollow giggle. Another boy is locked in a dark closet for hours, emerging blinking and desperate to please. The ritual is repeated, night after night, until the smallest sign of resistance vanishes. You watch as older slaves, already broken, are used as examples. They perform flawlessly, smiling as they are struck or ordered about, showing no trace of pain or pride. "See," the handler says, "this is how you survive." It's not a lesson, but a warning. The system is perfectly calibrated. Too much resistance, and you are beaten or starved. Too little, and you risk being seen as dull or defective, a commodity that will not fetch a high price. Here's where the institutional cruelty of Roman law reveals itself. Dealers consult property records noting each slave's progress. Some keep meticulous ledgers. Obeys instantly, responds to all cues, trained in music or dance. Those who struggle are assigned extra hours of training or are lent out for use by others as practice, their bodies a means of instruction for those learning to break new arrivals. Petronius records this economy of suffering, writing, "The untrained are reshaped by pain, their cries a chorus to the appetites of the city." But the most disturbing practice is reserved for the final breaking. In this, the handlers isolate you, denying food, warmth, even the comfort of speech. You are left alone in darkness, with only the sound of your own breathing and the memory of lost freedom. When you are finally brought out, blinking and half-starved, you are made to kneel before your master or trainer to thank them for their mercy in allowing you to serve. The ceremony is a perverse inversion of gratitude, a ritualized erasure of the self. Seneca, in his letters, describes seeing such rituals in patrician homes, young slaves trembling as they recited thanks for being chosen, their faces hollow, their voices empty. But here's where the machine grinds down even the strongest. For those who cannot adapt, who scream or refuse, who collapse under the pressure, there is no rescue. Some are beaten until they lose consciousness. Others are branded as defective and sent to the mines or the galleys, their bodies condemned to a slower, more public death. Dealers keep a careful tally, weighing the cost of another day's training against the risk of lowering the market price. For the most profitable brothels, a ruined slave is simply a loss, written off in the records, an entry erased, a mouth forgotten. You start to recognize the faces of those who have given up. Blank, compliant, never meeting your gaze. You learn in time to mimic them, for survival, to betray no thought, no hope, no memory of a former life. You are instructed, over and over, that your value is in your silence, your obedience, your ability to disappear into the will of another. Cicero's legal speeches, preserved on cracked tablets, make it plain. The greatest property is that which needs no command. It knows the master's desire by instinct, not by instruction. But the cost of this survival is incalculable. Each act of compliance carves away another piece of who you were. Each day in the training room blurs the boundary between performance and reality, until the only truth that remains is the certainty of pain. The door at the end of the corridor opens one last time. A handler gestures for you to rise. "It's time," he says. "You're ready." But what you do not yet know is that some buyers demand more than training. Some want proof that a slave can endure anything. The most lucrative contracts, signed in shadowed rooms, require not just submission, but the demonstration of absolute surrender. And the final test is something you will never be allowed to refuse. You wait in the cold darkness, every sense raw, your body already trained to obey any command before it's spoken. The door opens, light slices across the floor, and you are called out for the last time. You have been prepared for sale, but now comes the final ordeal, reserved for those whose price is highest or whose resistance lingers. This is the discard pile, the hidden world beyond the auction, where the dealer's system discards what cannot be perfected and completes the transformation of those it deems worthy of profit. You are led into a windowless room deep beneath the dealer's house. The walls here are lined with amphorae of oil, cloth for cleaning wounds, and tools whose use you've already come to fear. The air is thick, humid, heavy with secrets. Here, the handlers assemble those marked for final inspection or for one last round of seasoning. For some, this is the end of the road, a last chance to fetch a high price. For others, it's a silent sentence. The defective, too scarred, too broken, too rebellious, are gathered in the corner awaiting the dealer's verdict. You watch as a scribe calls out names that have long ago ceased to mean anything, replaced by numbers, scars, whispered rumors of where the body will go next. The most valuable slaves are subjected to a new level of scrutiny. Some are forced to demonstrate obedience before a room full of buyers, their shame and fear converted into a commodity. Others undergo brutal corrections, cosmetic surgeries with crude knives, ointments mixed to bleach or darken skin, even the shaving of heads to erase any trace of origin. A girl beside you is given poppy to dull her pain while a doctor slices away the mark of an old wound. The only witnesses are the handlers and the ledger keepers. Seneca wrote of this process with cold clarity. The market cares nothing for the soul, only for the shape of the flesh and the price it will bring. But the fate of the unsellable is even more chilling. Those who cannot be fixed are not returned to the market. Some are led away in silence, shackled to chains, bound for the mines or the galleys. Others simply disappear, absorbed into the city's shadow economy, or left to die in the darkness beneath the stones. Archaeological discoveries outside the walls of Pompeii have uncovered mass graves, bones heaped together, marked by blows and binding. The market leaves no record of these names, no memory of their suffering. Their value was weighed, found wanting, erased. The psychological cost of this system is deeper than scars or bruises. After weeks or months of breaking and seasoning, you find yourself moving automatically, thoughts narrowing to the next order, the next breath. The survival instinct, once defiant, has become obedience. Some of those around you retreat into silence, their minds drifting far from the pain. Others become model slaves, performing compliance so perfectly that buyers compete for them at ever higher prices. You see the haunted look in their eyes and wonder if there's anything left behind the mask. You remember the stories whispered by the elders, the rare souls who tried to resist to the end. Some starved themselves. Some found ways to end it quickly. Most were simply broken, spirit and body, until nothing remained but an empty shell for someone else's pleasure or profit. The slave market of Rome did not only traffic in bodies, it trafficked in the systematic destruction of self. And yet, the greatest horror is not the violence, but its acceptance. Outside, the city goes on, merchants haggling in the forum, children playing in the alleys, priests offering prayers to gods who never see these rooms. The buyers, the dealers, the magistrates, they all agree that this is simply how the world works. The system that remade you is invisible to them, its machinery turning beneath the marble and mosaic. But history preserves the evidence, if you know where to look. The ancient graffiti of Pompeii, the legal codes that recorded the sale and seasoning of slaves, the accounts of Martial, Petronius, and Seneca, writers who documented Rome's darkest appetites, even as they dined with those who profited from them. Each record is a shadow cast by a vanished life. You find yourself staring at your hands that once belonged to someone else in another life, before you became inventory, display, property. There is no rescue coming. You have been processed, sold, remade for use and for profit. The preparation is complete. But as you leave the final chamber, some part of you survives. Maybe only a memory, a flicker of resistance, or a wish that your story might someday be known. The machinery of the Roman market did everything it could to erase the individual, but the very act of remembering, of knowing what happened in these hidden rooms, restores a measure of dignity that was meant to be lost forever. This is the legacy that history tried to bury, the truth that lived and died behind closed doors. Rome's greatness was built on the systematic breaking and selling of human souls. To see it is to confront the reality beneath the marble, a world where power turned suffering into profit and silence into survival. You came to this story thinking slavery was a simple transaction, auction blocks, chains, a price paid in coins. But now you understand. The true cost was always measured in the erasure of identity, the manufacture of compliance, the pain that never left the record. If you're ready to see what Rome's textbooks never dared to show, hit subscribe now and continue this descent into the darkest corners of history, where the voices of the forgotten still demand to be heard.